basically what we see by now is people are lying, not because they want it, but because they cannot say the truth. And if we don't name the problem, we cannot create solutions.
Hi, I'm Gordon Lamphere, and welcome to the Real Finds podcast, where we have real conversations with key entrepreneurs, activists, and researchers who are shaping the real estate industry and, as a result, our world. On today's podcast, we'll be speaking with architect and workplace design strategist Marisa Toldo to dive into the future of workspaces, how caregiving challenges are costing businesses billions, and innovative design solutions for human-centered office environments can help promote efficiency and, as a result, more profitable workspaces. If you're interested in learning about the future of work, this podcast is well worth a listen. Marisa, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
So one of the things that I know is a huge concern for so many in the workforce is the whole idea of caregiving and care. But before we get into that, could you give us a 1-minute introduction about you and how you got into the world of real estate and the physical place?
Well, I'm an architect myself by training. I have been working in building construction for many, many years. I have been working in Latin America, Spain, and now I live in Germany. And a few years ago, my dad got Alzheimer's and he was living with Alzheimer's. And it really changed and shifted my perspective about the topic and the reality. I thought it was just ourselves. And when I started to ask around, I realized that it's a topic that we are really worried. It's affecting many people. We are going through a longevity society, an aging population, and we have also the demographic shift. And this topic came really close to my heart because of the reality I was facing with my own.
There are a lot of caregivers out there in society, and they really span the whole gambit of people in the workforce or out of the workforce. And I'm curious, how do you see that playing out in both society and kind of in the professional setting in general?
Wow, this is going to be a big shift. Ever had the caring company and already says that at least in America, 73% of your employees are caregivers. 73% is a big number. And it's not going to be below, that's for sure. I do think that we really need to first name and see the problem because we haven't seen it and how really affect the way we work, the way we care, the way we live. We also saw that many caregivers are dropping the workforce in order to care. And this is a huge problem because it's not that one person leaves. It's a systemic problem. The next one who's coming will have the same problem. And how we, as a society, we are thinking to frame it is a good question. And we really need to run, because it's not a problem for the future. It's a problem for now that is getting worse in the future, unfortunately. I do think that we really need to be more aware of the flexible work schedules and how, for example, you see companies who already provide childcare. But what happened when we talk about eldercare? We have a big silence. So we have a really few companies providing support. And for me, which is the best out of all, is the intergenerational practice, which is connecting and building bridges between generations, between the elders and the child. Not just because it's good, because we are also facing a big loneliness problem, So how we face all these challenges that we have as a society, and it's connected with your workforce because you are the one who care. You or your employee, your colleagues, many in your work environment.
So that we've got this problem, right? And I think most people can admit that it is a problem. Um, what are some potential solutions?
Well, for me, as I say, intergenerational practice is a winner. When you see how the interactions, guided interactions between child and elderly are a winner for all of them. And you have companies who say, okay, we provide childcare because it's the return of investment is a positive. It's not because out of heart, but because if the numbers are there. What if we start to think about it? Also supporting the elderly, our employees, parents, or partners. No, and for me, it's quite interesting because required to see the situation in a really innovative way, in a cross-pollination way, because we see or we are used to get solutions in silos. So childcare, eldercare, generational care, workforce here. And I'm asking why? Because you are the only one who do and face everything. Also, I'm going to be quite provocative. I like to talk about provocations more than the solutions because I think we are in a good moment to provoke thinking, to engage with the ideas. Think about we have basically not all of them, but the majority of the office buildings. We are talking about 30% vacancy. What we are going to do with that, no? So what we are going to do with the ground floors in these spaces that could be useful in a good way. For example, in the suburbs, we are seeing also that people are done with commuting. So we don't want to spend 2-3 hours commuting every day. So how we can take spaces that doesn't look maybe so appealing because of the vacancy and rethink them, provoke thinking them as more mixed uses. No, think about one space collocated, what they call collocated spaces, childcare, eldercare close by, work environment close by. We see sometimes co-working space providing childcare, but why we are not maybe provoking no more and think what if we take spaces and create more mixed uses, no? Also to see how we can use this empty spaces because if not remote work and flex work is staying, even though some companies are really pressuring people to go back to the office, but the vacancies are there, so we have free spaces.
So, one of the topics that I generally hear from HR directors is, well, we can give a little bit of flexibility and that might solve the problem. Do you think that flexible work schedules are the solution, or is that just putting a band aid on the problem?
It's a part of the solution. It's a part of the solution. I always say it's not one size fit all the pockets and depends on the industry itself, but we see that flexibility helps. You can work depending on your task, on your team, more flexible because sometimes your child gets sick and you need to work from home. Sometimes you need to bring your parent to the doctor appointment. And basically, what we see by now is people are lying, not because they want it, you know, but because they cannot say the truth. And if we don't name the problem, we cannot create solutions, you know? And for example, sometimes you need to work better in few hours in the morning because you need to deal with some caregiver issues, but doesn't mean that you cannot deliver the work you can do, you know, because I do believe more in like a providing the work done rather than micromanaging people. We are talking also to build trust in your workforce, to allow them to be who they are. Because in the way you feel safe in your work environment, you are going to deliver most. So if you take a caregiver, that basically we need the money to pay stuff. You know, you need to pay the rent, you need to pay the care, you need to pay many things. I'm going to be really happy if I'm be able to keep my work and also being able to support my loved ones. So flexible work environments are going to be for me key because allowed space for all this and also naming the situation. Also commuting, it's really need to drive 3 hours of every day of your life when you can maybe have some other spots that fits your work force needs and support them with less commuting, for example. So it's many things here.
So there's one thing that I've seen you talk about and write about, and that's office vacancy. And I'm curious. A lot of people write about it as, it's a demand problem, and that's the primary focus, and that's true to a degree. But one of the things I've seen you write about is office as a design failure, and I'm curious, uh, how is office a design failure?
I do think we design spaces for the perfect employee. No, no care, no need, one single person able to work 24/7. It doesn't exist. We all have, no, this is true. You can have some people able to work for free in some span of time. But unfortunately, you get sick, you get older, or I always say, well, I'm more wisdom now. I'm not more older. No, I have more wisdom. Um, but the reality is here. If you see the data, we are collective. We are human beings. We are employees. We are parents. We are daughters. We are all of them. And spaces to work are amazing. I have a beautiful colleagues designing for neurodiversity, which is a huge topic. Many talk, but you have nowadays at least between 4 and 5 generations in the workforce. Do you fulfill all their needs? We need to think about it. So we are really designing for these. I always call them the carefree employees. We apparently are carefree employees, but in reality we are not. Um, you know, we don't talk about it in the workforce, which is true. Every time I bring the topic to the table, I hear the crickets like click click. I say, okay, amazing. You have a childcare. Let's talk about eldercare, and people are like, why this woman is talking about it? So we are not carefree employees. We are employees. We love to work. But the reality is you start to work with 20 something, you ended with 60, 70 something. And in all these ages, your reality change and your needs change. So how we really design, and this is again a provocation, how we really design spaces to support the way we work and how the work is going to change in the future. Because, for example, if you talk about office environment is one point. If you talk about a hospital, it's another environment. Industry, it's different. But uh, AI is here and is changing a lot the way we work. But we are still humans, and we really need to embrace the human in us, which is part of how projects goes.
So, how do we embrace that humanity in us and still incorporate AI and all this new intelligence into the workplace?
Well, I guess first is giving a space for people feel safe, because the way you bring your own self or you are allowed to talk is you feel safe in your work environment, which not many companies allow that. The other is to see that reality change. So how we provide these spaces for care. And the other part is technology is here and it's going to change the way we work. But I'm a human person. I love people. I'm curious about people. I love technology too. So I'm pro technology. But how we get this right balance, and what are the works we are going to do? What are the works we are not going to do anymore? How we get this balance, I guess, depends a lot on the sector itself, because no one solution fits all the pocket, but also allow people to bring the topic to the table. For example, when I was embracing with caregivers, and I told them, well, would you like to have this service, for example, your company to take care of your elders? They say like, well, I don't want the company to know that I'm dealing with that. You have this group of people. Then you have another group of people who say, well, it would be amazing because I can check really fast So I know that my father is going to be or my parents is going to be in a safe environment. And then you have another group who say, nice, but not in the work office, not in the office itself, but co-located, which is interesting because it's providing you a bunch of information who say like, people need the service, need the support, but how and where we locate that should be co-located, in which environment, how we make people feel also safe with your caregiver roles and your working roles, because not all the kids have good relation with their parents, not all the parents have good relation with the kids, but the number shows that we need to care even if we don't want it. It's reality there. But for me, it's also, should ask people, and it's going to be in hand by hand for me also with the city itself or the location itself. We really need to start thinking more in solutions that involve more than one sector. Because we cannot handle it. So we need to think about private sector, public sector, health sector, the city itself, or the municipality you are in, how we can support each other. Because I make a draw, it's really fun. It's like you, and then you pay taxes to the city. You are the employee. You are the daughter of your parent caregiver. You are the mom of your kids. And you also need to balance your health. So, and it's all you, and all these stakeholders are connected with you. So how we cannot, I know it's challenging. I know it's really provoking, but I like it. I like to provoke people because I think the way we provoke these thinkings and go out of the what is should supposed to be, it's inviting to create a different solutions, or inviting people to speak out and say, well, I'm not agree with that, but maybe I am agree with the other option. And maybe we can think in a different way and get better solutions that we haven't thought before.
So, one of the things that, speaking of provoking, that provokes a lot of heated debates in HR, particularly, at least I can attest in the US, is the issues that we're seeing in the longevity society of multi-generational workforces. And so I'm curious what you're seeing in particular in terms of how people are dealing with the physical space when sometimes you're incorporating 50 different years of a workforce.
It's challenging everywhere, it's not just in America, it's everywhere. I do think that we are going more towards hoteling, and we are going towards more different mixed solutions in the workforce. Depend on the task you are doing, depends on the team itself. I love to talk about reverse mentoring because we need the younger and we need the older. And if we are able to build bridges, to communicate each other, to exchange and respect and see each other, to be able to have this conversation respecting each generation and to learn what we can learn from the others, it's creating spaces that allow us to thrive as a company. And also to understand that younger workforce have a different needs and view than the senior workforce, you know? And we need all of them. We need the wisdom, we need the experience, we need the engagement and the thriving for the youngers. We need this reverse mentoring. It's, for me, it's the only way to innovate. Depends also in which industry, in which sectors. I don't like to give this homemade solution for everyone because I don't think I don't think it works. So I will give you like a really funny example. You ask someone from Finland, it's cold. How many degrees is cold? Because you ask someone from, for example, Venezuela, it's cold, and then you will have two different. It's cold. You are talking about minus 20 centigrades, and the other could talk about 25 centigrades. So, how much noise is noise? How we embrace, because then you have the people with neurodiversities, which are, and this is something interesting because I was engaging with an professor, a researcher, and how it's called, the people who do neurological studies, so a neurologist, because I was freaking out for the neurodiversity. I asked her, so you are a researcher in the topic, let's talk about neurodiversity. And then she said like, well, no one is normal. We have just people who not being tested. And for example, we have a senior workforce who have never been tested, who have never been sensitive to the topic, and they are neurodiverse without knowing, you know? So it's really interesting, but how we create safe spaces to bring the conversation and respect and the curiosity also, which is for me is the part of the spark. How we embrace this curiosity for the different ages in the workforce to be curious and respectful for the need of the other, no? How we can ask, how we can create this environment, because then what we my perspective, what we are going to see, we are going to see more similarities than difference. And we really need to embrace in these bridges and to build these commonalities rather than to keep people separated.
So, embracing commonalities is a challenge, but it's doable. Um, and I'm curious, are there any tools that we can do to try to find broad commonalities and try to make the workforce as accessible to, and the workplace as accessible to as many people as possible? Because, as you said, there's no carefree, perfect employee, but maybe there are some large buckets that we can put that make workforce as accessible and as functional for as many employees as possible. So, how do we get there?
Ask, ask people. Really, it's super interesting because sometimes I'm talking with some managers and I'm like, we will not never ask people because then we will get like 10,000 different requirements and needs. But I was engaging with really younger employees in like a startups environment or really tech environment, and they don't do anything without asking. And I was fascinated by both approach. No, I say like, okay, interesting. There are two realities, but for me, asking, even people are bored to make questionnaires and everything, but get the top team leaders to ask their team because they really work in a different environment. Depends on the team itself. I know that you cannot accommodate that in big multinationals, but you can create different work environment to respect all the needs. Asking is one point, which is key because you also need the data. If not, you are investing in millions in make and build beautiful office that no one wants to go, which is reality. And then you feel the pressure of the companies like, go back to the office. So like, well, yeah, but you want the people be happy at the office and feel thriving, or you are going to build an office just to have people in Zoom calls. It's like, what are the tasks, how we see each other, how we can ask that. And it's also this is going to be even more challenge. Um, are we allowing people to feel in their own space? Because I know that we have now this flex environment, and you go and drop. But do you feel that you belong to the office? You know, and or do you don't need to belong to the office because maybe you need to travel a lot and you need to have a spot that the acoustic works, that the environment is friendly. I'm a big fan of biophilic design. I love it, and which is something interesting and is now even more appealing is the field of neurodiversity, because now we are having the tools, and this is going to be even more freak for the people to talk about beauty in the space. You know how we
So,
can measure the
so
beauty in the
what
space.
is biophilic design for anybody who's tuning into the podcast who hasn't heard that phrase before?
Okay, biophilic design is bringing the nature into the building. So it's not just to put tree plants there to look at fancy. It's bringing the proper light, the proper acoustic. Also, the way you design should have some surprise. It's super interesting. It's not a new field. It's like a 30, 40 years. It's quite long. But it's bringing the aspect to the nature, to the building itself. But why? For example, let's talk about lighting. If you involve that good lighting requires a light, not just blue light or white light or like luxus measurement, that we have a bunch of regulations talking about that, but how we embrace this lighting system that support the circadian rhythm, um, how we create environment that make people move around. Why moving? Because if people think that sitting for 8 hours in a desk is productive, you're killing yourself. You need movement. In order to be productive and be healthy, you need to move. The part of acoustic, if you have an environment that is super noisy, no one can get concentrate there. And also, I'm a big fan of the smells and the materials you use, because what you breathe is going direct into your bodies. What type of painting are you using? What type of materials? So all these chemicals that is affecting you in one point, no? And the space design itself also plays a role. How we can measure the humidity. For example, plants help to deliver a better humidity, which reduce the sickness rate because you have less virus around it, and also the quality of the air. I always say, I'm a big fan that if I'm able to open my window, we cannot have this choice in many office spaces. But are we designing a space that people maybe can make and run the walk around the building for a short time? Because this allow natural daylight and movement. And it's not about productive, it's about getting productive in the way you move, in the way you. I'm always talking about also walking meetings. We allow this kind of walking meetings in which environment and what for. It should be there because it's a way to keep your employee healthy. And also the lighting, coming back to the lighting, why you want to have a good lighting? Because you want your employees be able to sleep. Because if they don't sleep, they're not going to be productive. And if you just have this
Yes.
blue lighting, is affecting because it's affecting your circadian rhythm and it's affecting your sleeping. So you want to have a good lighting system because you want your employees be able to sleep at night in order to be fresh next day and be able to work. So it's really fun. It's not putting some plants. It's really thinking in productivity and efficiency.
Yeah, I know one company we've worked with who they put in a gym, they put in better natural lighting and a better HVAC system, and they were like, "Wow, we have like 25% less sick days," and it's like, guys, yeah, this is. People don't
Hey,
just do this because out of the kindness of their heart. Sometimes, as corporations, it makes financial sense.
yeah,
So, one of the things that makes a lot of financial sense is trying to understand beyond just asking your employees, what are other ways that we can gather information about the workspace? I know this is something that you've touched on, um, but like beyond asking, which I think is great, and that's something that we do all the time. Are there other ways that we can get information about how our workforce might be looking at their workspace, or how occupiers might be using their space to try to create better spaces?
sensors. You have 10,000 sensors. Well, here in Europe, we are people sensitive with the data policy. I have a really good facility manager friends, and they love to measure everything. And yeah, you have some really fancy thing you can put it below your table on the desk, and they measure everything: acoustic, of space occupancy, also where people sit. So you can get an anthropologist to do that, which I love them. But it's also interesting how where people sit in a space, and you can do that through studies or through sensors. I'm more into the studies itself. Sensors helps you to measure everything, but it's data. But you want to know why are you getting the data and what the data is responding in that way. For example, my godmother, she was a human psychologist, and sometimes we used to sit in a coffee place because she loves to see how people behave. And I love to see how people move in the space. And the funny part is normally people sit always in the safe spot, which is also have to do with biophilic design. You want to feel safe in a space. And it's interesting because maybe seeing how people move around the space and what the interactions they have, you will learn a lot and you can get a better information to do better designs. But you can always get data with this fancy measurement stuff. You have a lot of software, supplies, so things to measure. but I'm more into the human area to see why should they move that way. Why should we improve that way? So, for example, with the office meeting rooms, you can measure which meeting rooms are busy, which no. Sometimes makes sense to have a smaller one, bigger ones, and all this data is collected by the sensors, and people know that better than me.
Yeah, we've had a number of sensor companies on, and I'm sure we'll have more. That's always uh, an interesting conversation. Particularly, some of them have much better data privacy than others, and I would say, you don't necessarily want to be putting video cameras in the bathroom for people, but at the same time, you also don't want to be just relying purely on employees' word of mouth, because one of the data sensor companies we work with, they were phenomenal at uncovering basically conference room waste, and their employees said, "Oh, we use the conference room almost every day." It's like, no, you don't. You
No,
don't. So,
just you
so in
use,
terms,
but how many people use and big office space? No, we use it. We are three in an office of 20. Makes sense?
yeah, I mean, we've had this conversation with particularly huddle rooms versus conference rooms, and uh, I think that's something that companies are changing and moving forward. One of the things that we'd love to move forward on, though, is kind of understand where things are going. And one of the basic things I've heard you talk about is AI and kind of the workforce of the future. And so I'm curious, what are you seeing for companies that are looking at space and trying to plan around AI?
Mm. Yeah, this is quite interesting because it's going to be quite disruptive, I think. We see that some companies need a bigger office space because they are growing, more working in technology, but then they need to reduce because they're out of the market. Um, so I don't have a clear answer because I have no clarity yet. I think it's going to be the next 3-5 years are going to be quite disruptive. When you talk with companies and you ask them how they see themselves in 10 years, you get answers in quarters. I say like, okay, I'm happy that you think in quarters, but I think, I'm an architect. We need to think forward. And this is going to be quite challenging because I guess really few people know where we are going and how. Um, I do think we really need to create spaces that make sense for the human being and the longevity society. So we have a lot of disruption, but something that is clear is that society is going to be longevity. We have these aging populations and we are still caregivers. So how, and I know this is quite provoking because everyone is thinking in AI. So should we get data centers? How we get the water, the electricity, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, okay, nice. We need that. Um, But if you want to work with people and you still need people in the next 3-5 years, because we are going to have a lot of disruption. The way we work is going to change. But in 3-5 years, you still need people. And these people have realities that we need to face and we need to support. Because if you want to have a good employee, you need to keep them. It's not so easy that I replace this one because the next one is going to have the same problem. So we really need to start thinking how we support a longevity society in the aim of what is happening in the world. Sorry for not being so techy and give you like a more clear picture, but
No, I think that's an honest approach to it, because I think one of the biggest things people aren't talking enough about is how people actually fit into all this technical change. We have thousands of listeners that listen to this podcast. What's one thing that they should be thinking about that maybe we haven't talked about already?
reuse and repurpose of the spaces itself, how we can allow more mixed uses in one environment. And I know that people will hate me because they get more money if they rent an office than to social housing or like a daycare facility. But I do really believe that we really need to embrace the community and think about more mixed uses because we, as a society, we are going to need that. The office spaces that we have, how we can repurpose them. So we need to think also in sustainable way. It's so funny because I'm an architect and I don't like to say, let's build everything new. No, how we make, which is like a challenge for being an architect, but how we make sense of the space we have for the needs we are going to have. So I want to see more nature in the buildings, more people having mixed uses and not just like a 10,000 square of offices and then houses, but how we mix them in a way that is intelligent for the planet, for the people, and for all us, because the reality is there. So at least people in Germany are quite sensitive with the sustainability and circular building and all this stuff. Um, and I'm agree with that. But we really need to rethink the way we are building and the way we are using the spaces. I know that people are not going to be too happy to hear that, but it's another provocation. So how we can embrace a mix of use that makes sense also from the financial point of view. And I don't have a reply for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think mixed use can be the most financially profitable. I know my own grandfather was part of a number of developments that he was pushing for mixed use because he thought it would be financially more profitable. And then it ended up um, not getting approved because of a variety of things. And then a local village came back to us and said, "Hey, would you consider mixed use?" And we showed them, the notes from when we originally developed it 15 years prior. And we're like, "Yeah, we'd love it. We were pushing for this 15 years ago." Um, so I think there's definitely some times in business where you have the developer pushing against it, but the dirty secret of real estate is developers just want to make money, and sometimes mixed use is the highest and best use and most profitable for an area, and what's going to ultimately drive a profitable deal. Um, One of the things that you know we love to talk about on the podcast, and this is one of our final four questions that we always ask, and we love men and women who are in the arena because they tend to have interesting insight on this. Is where do you see real estate going 10 years from now?
Well, I love robots, no, which is true. I love
Yeah.
humans, but I'm pro robots, which is quite contradictory. Sorry, because I mix German, Spanish, English, Italian. It's like a mess. So, um, one of my best friends and advisors, an anthropologist expert in robots in care. And for me, it's like, okay, how we think spaces for be robot friendly. And this is something that people in care hate. When I talk about it, I'm like, well, we have a demographic gap. Hello? Realistic. So I do think we need to think about robots in space and how we design spaces robot friendly. Drones. I was talking with some investors here in Berlin, and they were telling me that they are rebuilding like a super fancy space. And then I was say like, so I can park my drone. He thought that I was joking. It's like, I'm not joking. Oh, how do you think that the levers are going to be in 10 years? That you're still are going to have the guy driving and killing you. Say, no, everything is going to be flying. And he said, like, you are crazy. Like, I'm not crazy. Talk about people in the aviation, in the drones, in all these deliveries. So it's a reality. I'm curious. I don't know how we are going to solve that, but let's think about how we build and create spaces robot friendly and drone friendly. And I know I'm quite provoking, but yeah.
No, I think that's a really important topic that not enough people in the office and retail world are talking about. I know in the industrial world, we've been talking about that on the podcast for since the podcast's inception. And anybody who's been reading industrial magazines knows that automation and drone use has been a big topic, at least for the last 10 years. So it makes sense that it would come over to office, and it makes sense that it would come over to other asset classes as well. Um, in terms of things that make sense, though, one of the things that people get a lot of joy out of on this podcast is we have a lot of younger listeners, and they love to hear from some of the men and women who have been successful in their careers and get a little tidbit of advice. So, if you had 1 minute to give yourself advice when you're starting off your career, what would it be?
Oh, keep different sources, which means the same way you talk with the cleaning lady, talk with the sociologist, talk with the researcher, talk with the users. Be open eye and open heart. I'm extremely curious. I'm talking with sociologists, anthropologists, caregivers, doctors, people in real estate, developers, with everyone, because it's allowed you to have a bigger picture. It's allowed you to have a fresh view, talk with different generations, different people from different areas, because keeps your mind curious and be what I call curious from the heart. Not being able to try to understand the other and try to learn from the perspective. Um, if you see my environment is quite mixed. I'm talking with people expert in airports and some other with robots in care. And today I spent 1 hour ago, I was talking with a friend of mine who's an artist because they know how to get things moving in a different way. I talked with architects, also engineers, and keep this curiosity and be able to explore with different topics, because I'm a super fan of cross pollination, which it requires you to be flexible in your mind and your spirit, because sometimes it's really like, and the other is agree to disagree. And this is something that I used to have with some friends, like, let's agree here that sometimes we are going to disagree, you know?
Like cross pollination ends up finding some of the best results. And that's kind of been the whole point of this podcast. We bring on very different people, and we we get a lot out of it. And one of the ways that we find these very different people is we ask our guests. So, who should be the next man or woman on the podcast?
Depends on what do you want to have. For example, you have the University of Pennsylvania, who have an amazing think tank in intergenerational practice, if you want to bring more to the topic. You have also people, I can't remember the name exactly, but because I know more people in Europe about neuroarchitecture, because it's going for me to be the next, how we can bring beauty in a space. I know it's called, the guy, 1 second, because I have the book here. Davide Ruzzon, but he's in Italy. He's amazing, from the built environment. I do believe intergenerational practice are going to be a big player in the future. Now we see more requests, more curiosity about it. The University of Pennsylvania have this amazing think tank with also architects and people in different fields. And neuroarchitecture for me is amazing, because finally we have data. Amazing
Well,
people doing amazing work there.
I'm going to reach out to you after we finish on that, and I'd love to get some contacts. But before we wrap up, what's the best way for someone to get in contact with you?
Well, you can send me an email. You have my information there, hello@marisatoldo.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Both of them
Excellent.
works.
Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast today. We really appreciate it, and we have to have you on in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been really a pleasure.
Thanks again to Marisa. We appreciate her insights. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please give us a like, a 5-star rating, and a review. Your comments, interactions, and subscriptions truly matter, and they help us continue to provide quality guests. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Gordon Lamphere with the Real Finds Podcast. Thank you for listening.